Welcome to the Hyperfix Hub. Let's overthink Fallout. Listen, have you guys ever met someone who really won't shut up about how American they are? You know, the real Americans? Now imagine that guy showed up in a black and silver suit of power armor. He rolls up in his vertibird and says, "Good news, citizen. The United States government has returned." And then immediately starts scanning your DNA like you're a suspicious burrito at the TSA. Yeah, well, that's the Enclave. Alright, so today I'm breaking down the Enclave, what they are, where they came from, and why they're one of the scariest factions in Fallout. And I'm not talking that they have good loot kind of scary. It's the this is what power looks like when it survives the apocalypse and decides that you don't count as a human. Because the Enclave's whole thing is simple. They don't see themselves as a faction. They see themselves as the rightful owners of the entire country. The Enclave constantly claims they're the inheritors of the pre-war United States. They use the symbols, the speeches, the America will rise again messaging, all of it. And on paper, that sounds almost inspiring. Like, sure, the world ended, but maybe the government can be rebuilt. Maybe there's order again. Maybe there is hope. Except the Enclave's version of hope comes with a pretty big footnote. And the footnote reads as follows: "The hope is for us, and it's not for you. Because the moment you're not part of them, then you're not a citizen. You're just another problem that needs eradicated." Here's what makes the Enclave different from your average wasteland dictatorship. The Raiders, they want your caps. The Khans, they want drugs. The Legion, they want your obedience. The Enclave? The Enclave wants your existence to stop inconveniencing their worldview. They're not trying to build a civilization with you in it. They're trying to build a civilization after they remove you from the equation. And that's why they show up as a major antagonist in the series. Because they're basically the in-game boss of ideology. Not the evil because I'm evil because they've rationalized genocide as a policy. So, where does the Enclave come from? The Enclave's origins are in pre war American deep state. High ranking political, military, and corporate figures who basically formed a shadow network. Think presidents, generals, industrialists, scientists, senators, the kind of people who don't just influence policy, they are the policy. And when the world starts sliding towards nuclear war, they didn't react like normal people would. They didn't think, how can we save the country or save as many lives as we can? They thought, how do we save ourselves and still maintain control of what's left? So they built bunkers, offshore facilities, hidden installations, all designed to keep them isolated, safe, and in charge after the bombs. Now, the reason the Enclave becomes so obsessed with genetic purity is actually pretty straightforward. They survived in control environments. They don't live out in the irradiated hellscape with everyone else. So, over generations, they start believing genuinely that although it's technically true in a narrow sense, but it's morally insane in practice, they honestly do believe that they're the last pure humans left. And once you accept that as your worldview, it's a very slippery slope. Because if you're the only true humans left, then everyone else just becomes mutants, or near humans, or just completely non compliant to your worldview. Pick your dehumanizing term of the day. And the moment you start labeling people like that, the next step becomes horrifyingly easy. You stop asking, how can we help them? And start asking, how do we eliminate all of them? In Fallout 2, they're the big villains, the big baddies. The Enclave at their most open, most confident, and almost most terrifying. In Fallout 3, they come back on the East Coast, rebuilding at Raven Rock and making moves around Project Purity. Now in Fallout New Vegas, you get their remnants, the what's left after the Empire collapse version. And in Fallout 4, they're mostly absent in the base game, with later add-on and creation content, but the shadow of what they did still hangs over the world. Fallout 76 are back in a different way, in secrecy, recruiting, bunker politics. And in the Fallout show, you get a taste of them through wider plot threads. The point is, the Enclave doesn't just show up and vanish. They're like a recurring reminder that the old world didn't really die. It just changed uniforms. So if you take nothing else from Part 1, take this. The Enclave is not America returning. The Enclave is power returning. And power does what power always does when it's scared. It starts drawing lines. You have your in group and your out group. You're pure and you're contaminated. And once you draw that line, you need a way to enforce it. Which brings us to the part that makes the Enclave feel like a genuine horror faction. It's their infrastructure, their control systems, and their involvement in the vaults. Because the Enclave didn't just prepare to survive the apocalypse, they wanted to manage it. Quick thing, if you're into this kind of Fallout deep dive, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be talking about a lot of questionable government decisions around here. Now, back to the breakdown. Last time we talked about who the Enclave is. A shadow government that survived the apocalypse, wrapped itself in American symbols, and decided that it alone had the right to inherit the world. Now we need to talk about the moment they stopped being a government in exile and turned into something else entirely. Because this is the part where ideology meets laboratory equipment. They said they were waiting things out, that the wasteland is temporary, the radiation will fade, that one day the surface will be ready again. But the longer they stay underground, the more disconnected they become from actual humanity. Because while they're sealed in bunkers with filtered air and clean water, everyone else is surviving however they can. Drinking irradiated water, living in or near the ruins, and breathing the contaminated air. And from the Enclave's perspective, that difference starts to look like corruption. At first, it's just terminology. They stop calling wastelanders citizens. They start calling them mutants. Not super mutants, just altered, changed, near human. And that phrase matters, because once you label someone as almost human, you don't have to treat them like one anymore. This is how the Enclave convinces itself it isn't committing murder. It's just performing a correction. They even give it a bureaucratic name: genetic noncompliance. And here's what makes this worse than just normal fascist nonsense. The Enclave doesn't just rely on superstition, they rely on data, the charts, the samples, and the blood work. Radiation exposure readings. They don't say that we hate you. They say our models indicate that you are incompatible with our future. And that's far more terrifying, because hatred can be emotional. This is where the forced evolutionary virus comes back into the picture. FEV existed before the Great War. Originally designed to improve humanity, it was supposed to strengthen soldiers, increase resilience, create something better. But post war, the Enclave finds a new use for it. It's not to improve humanity, but to erase it entirely. They take FEV and modify it into something far worse: a strain designed to kill anything that doesn't match their genetic baseline. Not just super mutants, not just ghouls, but everyone in the wasteland. If you lived outside their bunkers, you failed the test. And this is the sick genius of the Enclave's ideology. They convince themselves that this is mercy. They genuinely believe wiping the slate clean is the only way humanity survives. In their worldview, the wasteland is chaos, democracy has failed, and the old world has collapsed. So instead of rebuilding with people, they decided to rebuild after people. One clean generation, one swift reset, one world where only true humans remain. This is the part that hits the hardest when you really think about it. The Enclave doesn't see itself as evil, not even a little bit. They think they're the last adults in the room. Everyone else is just a debris from history. So when they plan global extermination, releasing modified FEV into the jet stream, they will not call it a genocide. They will call it a restoration, a clean world, a corrected timeline, a future without compromise. This is where the Enclave crosses the line permanently. Because at this moment, they are no longer pretending to govern. They are no longer pretending to protect. They are actively planning the extinction of people they claim to represent. Every citizen outside their walls becomes disposable. Every vault dweller becomes contaminated. Every survivor becomes a mistake. There is no version of the future where the Enclave coexists with vault dwellers and wastelanders. They only replace it. And here's the part that makes the Enclave even more interesting. Not everyone inside agrees. Some officers begin to hesitate. Some scientists start asking uncomfortable questions. Some soldiers start wondering why protecting America looks a lot like killing Americans. These cracks will not fix the Enclave, but they do matter. Because ideology can survive anything, except division. Division is what kills empires. So by this point, the Enclave has everything: technology, power armor, birds, and advanced weapons. And they have one of the key things: scientific dominance. And yet, they're still doomed. Because the moment your entire ideology depends on eliminating everyone else, you run out of allies very quickly. Next part, that's exactly what happens, because the Enclave doesn't just make enemies of the wasteland, they make enemies of everyone, including themselves. Alright, here's where the Enclave story stops being theoretical. Because up until now, everything they've done happens behind sealed doors, in their labs, in their bunkers, in some classified rooms that nobody can hear screaming. But eventually, they step outside, and the second they do, the wasteland notices. When the Enclave finally reveals itself, it doesn't arrive quietly. It's got vertibirds, it's got plasma weapons, and cool power armor that looks nothing like the wasteland has ever seen. They don't introduce themselves as a new faction. They introduce themselves as the government. No negotiations, there's no elections, and zero consent. Just, hey, we're back, fall in line. And for about 5 minutes, it almost works. Because fear is very persuasive. But here's the problem: the Enclave doesn't show up offering protection, they show up demanding submission, genetic screenings, and mandatory compliance. And instant execution if you fail. So, to the average wastelander, the Enclave isn't hope. It's a death sentence with paperwork. And once word spreads that the Enclave is killing people simply for existing, there is no winning hearts and minds. Now there is only resistance. This is where the Enclaves makes its fatal mistake. They assume technological superiority equals inevitability. And yeah, one unsafe soldier can wipe out a squad of raiders. But nations don't fall to raiders. They fall to coalition. The Brotherhood of Steel sees them as an existential threat. The NCR sees them as war criminals. And the Wastelanders, they see them as the monsters of the wasteland. Even neutral groups want nothing to do with them. So suddenly the Enclave isn't fighting one enemy, they're fighting all of them. And this comes crashing down in Fallout 2. This is the Enclave at its height. The oil rig, advanced armor, President Richardson, and Frank Horrigan, who's pretty much a walking extinction of it. And yet, they still lose. Not because they lack power, but because their ideology blinds them. They underestimate Wastelanders. They assume fear equals obedience. They believe no one could possibly oppose them, and that arrogance gets the oil rig blown out of the ocean. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When the Enclave loses the oil rig, it doesn't vanish. It fractures. The officers flee, scientists disappear, soldiers scatter, some try to hide, and some try to integrate back into society. But some still believe. And suddenly the wasteland is full of former Enclave members with advanced weapons and nowhere to go. And that scares everybody. The NCR doesn't mess around with this. They officially label the Enclave as a criminal organization. Membership alone is enough to get you arrested or executed. The Rangers hunt them. Bounties go up, trials happen. The Enclave doesn't just lose territory, it loses all legitimacy. They're no longer the government, they're fugitives with flags. But some of the Enclave does not run. They relocate east to the ruins of Washington, D.C., to Raven Rock, to Adams Air Force Base. And this is where Fallout 3 picks up the thread. A new president, a new plan, and a new lie. This time, they won't wipe everyone out immediately. This time, they're going to play the savior. Project Purity changes everything: clean water, mass distribution, the most valuable resource in the wasteland. The Enclave realizes something important. You don't need to rule through fear. You can rule through dependence. If people need your water, they'll tolerate your authority. At least at first. But the old ideology doesn't disappear. It's just slowly waiting. And then it happens again. The Enclave turns on itself. President Eden wants genocide. Colonel Adam wants control. One wants extermination, the other wants an empire. Both think that they're right. Neither questions the premise. And while they argue, the Brotherhood attacks. Liberty Prime is not subtle. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't debate ideology. It just walks forward, chucking nukes, and deletes the Enclave's last illusion of superiority. Raven Rock falls. Adams Air Force Base is destroyed. The mobile crawler burns, and the Enclave loses everything again. By the time of the Fallout New Vegas, all that's left are ghosts. Old soldiers, retired pilots, people who once believed in something that turned out to be monstrous. And they're tired. They're broken. And they're hiding. The Enclave doesn't end with a final battle. It ends with men sitting in the desert, haunted by what they helped build. So by now, the Enclave has lost almost everything: its leadership, its territory, its moral claims, and its future. And yet, it still exists in myths and remnants, in ideology, because ideas don't die when the armies fall. They die when people stop believing them. And in the next part, we're going to talk about why the Enclave keeps coming back, why Fallout refuses to let it disappear. Alright, so here's the uncomfortable part. Because the Enclave didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because the world rejected them. And Fallout keeps bringing them back, not because they're cool villains, but because they're familiar. This is the part people usually miss. The Enclave isn't evil because they want order. Plenty of factions want order. The NCR wants order. The Brotherhood wants order. Hell, even Mr. House wants order. The Enclave is different. They believe they alone deserve the right to survive. Not because they earned it, not because they helped anyone, but because they were born in the right bunker. And that's the key. The Enclave doesn't say we want to rule you, they say that we are you. They wrap their genocide in patriotism. They label extermination as restoration. And they turn murder into just simple maintenance. And that's why they're terrifying, because nobody in the Enclave thinks that they are the bad guys. Every time the Enclave is destroyed, something interesting happens. Someone else starts saying the same things. We just need stronger control. We need better leadership. We just need fewer people getting in the way. The uniforms change. The slogans change, but the logic still stays the same. Fallout doesn't reuse the Enclave because it's lazy. It reuses them because the ideology never fully disappears. This is why the Enclave works so well on Fallout 3 specifically. Because Fallout 3 doesn't treat them as a political faction. It treats them as a moral test. You don't debate with them. You can't vote them out. You have to confront them. Because some ideologies aren't meant to be compromised with. They're meant to be stopped. But here's the irony. The Enclave claims to represent humanity, but they never live among humans. They never share their water. They never starve. And they never rebuild. They just sit behind sealed doors and decide who counts. Meanwhile, real humanity is happening outside. In Megaton and Rivet City, in shacks made from scrap and hope. The wasteland survives without them. The Enclave had everything. They had power armor, vertibirds, orbital weapons, artificial presidents, but they never had legitimacy. Technology can win battles. It cannot create belonging. And without that, every empire collapses eventually. The Enclave believed history belonged to them. Fallout disagrees. Fallout says history belongs to those who endure. Not the cleanest, not the strongest, but the ones willing to adapt. The Enclave never wanted to adapt. They only try to rewind. That's why they matter. Because the Enclave isn't about the past. It's about the temptation to rebuild the future exactly the same way and expecting different results. They are Fallout's warning label. What happens when nostalgia replaces responsibility? When power replaces empathy? when survival becomes entitlement. The Enclave didn't fail because the wasteland was cruel. They failed because they refused to be a part of the wasteland. They wanted a world restored without the people who lived in it. And Fallout keeps reminding us you cannot save humanity by deciding who deserves to be human. The Enclave will always believe the world belongs to them. Fallout exists to remind us it never did. If you like this breakdown, hit subscribe, hit a like, leave me a comment. Because next time, we're going to be talking about the Institute that thought it had a perfect answer for the wasteland and learned the hard way that control doesn't equal civilization. Let me know in the comments, do you think the Enclave was always doomed? Or could they have chosen a different path?